So just to be clear, in case we don't know who's watching it, your first husband...
Lovely.
Nice chap.
Lovely.
Yeah, and as far as you know, to this day, probably still a nice chap.
I'm sure he's lovely.
Yeah. So he's not included in that.
No.
But there was... So you cut your father out, which is a healthy choice. Mm-hmm. And then the next fella you got with after him.
Yeah. Well, it was that guy in Seattle. Remember that one?
The guy who came here.
Oh, yeah.
That we brought to around Liverpool. We took him to the church.
And we took him to a wedding and he punched the mirror off the wall in that lovely hotel because I was dancing with the guy that I've known since I was born.
Yeah.
Who's 20 years older than me.
Oh, I know the guy that you must have been dancing with.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he flipped out over that, did he?
Lovely, calm fellow.
So that was actually a physically abusive relationship as well.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. And was that both of you or mainly him?
Was I physically abusive? No, I actually, after we, right as we were breaking up, because I was trying to leave him, that's never very clean cut though, is it? And I actually moved half my stuff out and then I pretended I was going to move back in, because I knew it was bad for me. I pretended that I was going to move back in. And I went round and I was really nice to him for about half an hour, just so that I could lull him into a false sense of security so that I could punch him. And
fucking mad scouse.
Mad scouse skills. And I punched him. And then of course in the face.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Fully.
While he was, you got him nice and relaxed.
Well, I had to get him to sit down because he was 6'4". I'm not 6'4".
He was a big boy, yeah.
Yeah. So I had to have him sitting down and then I punched him. And in that moment, I knew that we would break up and it would be done. Nothing to do with him or his reaction, but because I was like, I am now turning into you.
Yeah.
So that's the first time I'd ever hit him, first and last.
Yeah. Did you catch him clean?
I did.
Well done. The old boxing training.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was thrilled. But yeah, I was like...
Thank you so much.
You're such a love and you always knew you were love. But then I was like, well, now we're morphing.
Yeah.
Because if my only... Because, I tried everything else. You try everything else, right? You know, when you sense that they're dark siding, it's like you try and be nicer, you try and be strong, you try and feed them, you try and take them outside, you try and, whatever, you're trying to diffuse a situation that is impending. And nothing ever worked. But I was never brave enough to hit him because he was huge. But because he was a little bit softer because he thought I'd already gone. And then it was like the temptation that maybe I'd come back.
Yeah.
And then particularly I think the knowledge for me that it was all premeditated on my part.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not you.
Yeah.
And this is not somebody I want to turn into. And this is not something I want anything to do with. So I got 2 therapists then.
We need to dial up therapy real quick.
I had one I used to see on a Monday, which was like a talk therapy. You sit on your couch, I'll sit on my couch. She did some hypnotherapy and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I had, that was my first ever somatic therapist who used to make me like hold on to squishy balls and roll around on the floor and stuff.
Okay.
I hated it when I started because I'm British and I was like, this is just very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But really cool stuff. And then after that one, I had my first somatic experiencing therapist. And then once I'd done about 4,000 hours of therapy and all these different methods, I was like, okay, I think I've sort of got myself back together.
Yeah.
And then when I met the second guy that I married, when I'd moved to California, I don't know that anyone really works properly, because everyone's got money. And if you don't have money, everyone works in bars and restaurants and stuff. And I started working for this woman who used to be married to a really famous skateboarder. And
you could say his name, can't you?
No, that doesn't make me feel good about myself.
Okay. We won't name drop the famous skateboarder that people will know. There's a really famous skateboarder in North County.
And so when I was working for her, she would do cocaine on a Tuesday morning after she dropped her kid off at school. Wow. So she'd be like, here you go, have some of this. And I'm like, am I supposed to still work? Or is this where we stop working? And that was what it was like when I moved there, is that I just sort of, there's a lot of drugs there.
Yeah.
And I did ecstasy at university, but I hadn't touched a drug in 10 years at that point, And so we sort of started drinking a lot more than I had and doing drugs that I hadn't done in a long time. And it's really fun. Went to loads of festivals, did loads of things, but I was not in a sound state of mind, therefore, when I met this guy.
Yeah.
And he was the most fun. He's Captain Fun.
Yeah.
That's all he's good at,
Yes.
So it wasn't a good lead in, I think. And I think as well, with all the therapy that I'd done, I do think that there's an element of emotional maturity that is required for the therapeutic process to land.
Okay.
Because a lot of the stuff that I now teach, I sort of dabbled in, like inner child work, perfect example. I was absolutely petrified of inner child work. And I was with a male therapist when I was doing it, which probably was not the best choice for me, considering that most of my trauma came from men.
Yeah.
So I could basically pretend to do it.
Ooh, performative therapy.
Yeah.
Keep the therapist happy. That's a nice fawn response.
Yeah. So I could do it well enough. And I think as well, like, this is where what I mean by emotional maturity is that because he was happy and I was doing something and I was doing a thing, sort of convinced myself that that was enough, even though I knew that I wasn't doing it properly and it wasn't really enough. And that's what I mean. I wasn't mature enough to be able to say to myself, you're not digging deep enough here.
I think a lot of people watching this will guiltily resonate with that, what you're describing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel guilty saying it, even though I feel like 10 years later, I've actually done the work.
Feel more guilty.
Feel more shame.
Feel more shame. We are in Liverpool after all. It's a good Catholic city. You're in the perfect place. So you said emotional maturity is required for the therapy to land.
Yeah, because I think you have to be able to admit to yourself where you actually are in your process.
Okay.
So if you're saying, well, I do yoga and I meditate and I journal every day and I'm very aware of my feelings and I go to therapy, but what you're talking about is stretching and breathing twice and writing down, I love you on your bathroom mirror. And then you spend the other 23 and a half hours of the day obsessing about the person that you're no longer with.
Yeah.
You're not progressing in your own therapeutic context,
When I work with people, I have it's 80% female client base. I know that they're doing what you're talking about because at some point in the therapy, they'll break down and like a child, they'll say, I've already done the therapy for this. I've spent so long doing therapy on this. And I'm always aware that it's like buying a gym membership and going in the gym, moving a few weights around.
Wiping yourself with a towel a lot.
Yeah, and going, I think I'll take a selfie and go home now and eat a cake. I think I've deserved this. You're not getting in there and getting your hands dirty. You're doing it performatively.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a temptation because in many ways...
Because it's horrifying and terrifying and painful.
Well, it is. It can be horrifying, terrifying and painful, yeah. But everything in our culture kind of encourages and rewards performative action, symbolic action, rather than authentic action. So are you saying that the emotional maturity comes from authentic action?
It's cyclical, isn't it? So yes, it does. And you also need emotional performity to hold yourself to, you need emotional maturity to hold yourself to authentic action.
So for people watching this, and they're like, okay, that sounds cool. How do I become more emotionally mature?
You have to be able to have a conversation with yourself where you're not pretending to be someone else, which is where, to me, meditation is so foundational for a healing process because there's a lot of different functions for it. And I'd say that my other one in meditation is being able to create space. But the primary one is, can you find yourself? And who are you when there is nothing else around? Who are you when there's only you and yourself there and you can get underneath that monkey brain chatter? If you're underneath that and it goes quiet for a very, very long time and then you're feeling words instead of hearing bleep, 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 bleep.
Yeah.
What's that? Who's that? Who's there? What does that feel like?
Do you work mainly with women?
Yes. I mean, I have a fair few male clients as well.
Yeah.
But
Is there a sex-based difference here? Do you think this is more of a female coping mechanism? Because I've not heard as many men complain about that. So could this, over the millennia, because of not having the muscle that men have and living in fear that your partner can batter you to death, which is true for most women, there's just a size, weight difference.
Yeah.
The defense mechanisms for men become different to women across time.
Yeah.
Do you think the dissociation and kind of performative action and like I'm pretending to be this, but it's not really this, but if I keep pretending it'll be, do you think that's more of a female?
Absolutely. Females are way more appropriate towards a fawn response, aren't they? I mean, because we're trained that way.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't agree with something, then you just smile politely and nod.
Right. Right.
It's not attractive or culturally appropriate to be combative as a woman. And you need drive and you need fight to be able to fight for yourself towards a healing process. So it's probably part of where you're going there.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going. I'm sort of feeling around here. So is that also part of women can't be angry? Good girls aren't angry. Anger is ugly. Is that a similar sort of a thing?
Yes, it all goes in the same box, doesn't it? And that's a lot of the work that my mentor, Summer Nicole, that I worked with a lot in the last few years. That's one of the things that she teaches women across the board, is how to get really comfortable with being angry and how to release anger in a way that feels successful, not dirty and shameful.
Right. So then, particularly for women, but for men as well, would you say that owning anger and owning, let's say, the uglier emotions, there's no ugly emotion, it's just emotion, but if you perceive it as ugly, that's got to be a part of emotional maturity.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a key.
Because that's where you get stuck, isn't it? Is if you're going into a process that you find really difficult and say inner child healing, that's what it was for me. Going back and looking at myself as a child and feeling weak and feeling ashamed and feeling depressed and feeling anxious and diving back into what I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. I didn't want to look out from that space again.
Yes.
You know, it was too scary.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to admit that it was all of those feelings. You know, you sort of want to look at it like, well, I was the depressed thing, as opposed to I was feeling depressed, which is owning it. You know, I'm feeling a feeling.
Okay.
I was the depressed thing. It's the same with anxiety. So that's something that we talk about a lot with my clients, is you move people out of this trendy thing of saying my anxiety. Well, my anxiety, because then your anxiety all of a sudden is dictating how you behave and how you exist. Well, what is anxiety? A culmination of feelings that lead to a somatic response. So now if we pull apart the feelings, now you have control over your response, because there are feelings that happen in your body, and your somatics are something that you can assert. So you respond to your feelings, but you can assess your feelings. This is, again, meditation. How do you create the space between feelings coming up and you thinking to yourself, oh, I'm sensing this, this, and this. I'm identifying this as this feeling, that's that feeling, that's that feeling. Now, how would I like to respond? Instead of going instantly into a flight or fight response, creating space in the middle.
You said a lot there.
Sorry.
It's good though. You're making me do a thing. So
Go
on.
I was going to say the emotional maturity aspect would be sort of the space in the middle.
The space in the middle between
the thinking and the responsing. But you have to be able to, which is why you teach people emotional literacy. That is the foundation of every course you've ever done. Because you have to be able to identify what's happening in your own body, which is feelings arising. Yeah. And I talk about that in a lot of different ways, like really looking at what happens physically in your body when you sense a feeling. Because sometimes we get so overwhelmed so quickly that you go into a fight or flight response to mask the feeling that's coming up before you even know what the feeling is. I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to freeze, flight, fight, for whatever. But to tell you what I'm not going to do, I'm not going to look at you don't even know what it is yet. So I know if I am becoming afraid, that I get almost like a flutter in my solar plexus. And that happens before my brain knows that something is happening that is about to cause fear in my body, because my body senses it before my brain catches up, right? So this is where the pause comes in, is that if I have done enough practice with myself to learn what my body is doing, oh, this is my fear response, this is my joy response, this is my whatever, then I get to slow everything down and decide what my response should be. And it's not always perfect, is it? It's not like now if I get triggered, I'm like, don't worry, I'm calm as a lord at all times. Not at all.
Yeah.
But if I've got a lower grade trigger, there's no way I'm going off to the moon, which is what I would normally do. Goodbye.
I'm out of here. I'm done. You think sometimes when people say my anxiety, it's like a fake ownership that's actually a disavowal. Was that what you were suggesting?
I think, yeah, it's sort of, I hate to use the term victim mentality. Well, it's a little bit victim mentality. It also is just trendy to say that now, because it's like, oh, if you say my anxiety, then you have something that's bigger than you. So you just can't always control it, So you're displacing responsibility. Right. Which I understand that's how, having now experienced anxiety, I understand that's how it feels, but I don't think that it's a healthy response to give your power away like that. Yeah. Okay. So the point you were making is a little bit different to the one I heard. Okay. No, but that's the right thing. What you're saying is the right one. Because you want to claim responsibility for something so that you can change it. If it's something that's bigger and stronger than you, then what are you going to do? So when somebody says my narcissist, is that a similar thing? No, because that's more like a noun at that point. There's somebody else that's outside of their body. So my anxiety, the sentence structure and the thought structure would be something like, my anxiety makes me blah, 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 blah. Because of my anxiety, I can't. Because of my anxiety, I can't. Imagine if somebody said that, because of my narcissist, I can't. You'd be like, ugh. Well, they do. Because of my narcissist, I can't have friends. True. So even though they're using language that seems to be claiming it, there is something that's like, it's externalizing. Right. It's shifting the locus of control. Yes, yeah, exactly. We like locus of control. We like locus of control. And we need that thing to be internal at all times. Internal locus of control. So it's just a practice, isn't it? It's like, it's almost NLP, isn't it? If you're talking in a way that leaves you feeling disempowered, you need to change how you're talking. Okay. Because talking is thinking. Because talking is thinking and thinking is doing. So what language should they be using? How I feel when I do this, and therefore I'm going to, Right. Because that's all me. That's all me. That's not something that is happening to me. Yeah. That's something I'm experiencing. Yes. That's different. It's sort of like the thing with, is it who you are or is it how you behave? Okay. It's a behavior. Yeah. It's not an action. It's not, it's not sort of who you are ingrained in your genes and in your cells. Right. It's a behavior. Yes. Okay, good. I've not quite framed it this way. And I think that's an important reframing. I also like the point about becoming more emotionally mature in order for the therapy to actually land. That would solve a lot of sort of wanky therapy. Like I go to therapy twice a week and I'm not getting any better. And exactly. And it also solves a lot of when people come and sort of say, it's like you were talking about with the business. Well, what's the end point though? What do I do at the end? And, like one of the first things that I ever teach people, I get almost every single one of my clients to do is we write lists of peace and joy, things that move you towards joy, towards peace, away from joy and away from peace. Because if you're coming out of a toxic relationship, certainly if you've been brought up in a toxic childhood environment and then you've been choosing toxic relationships in adulthood, you have no idea what you like because you're used to being told. You don't know what you think. You're used to being told. And just the littlest things of joy and peace, of even when it comes down to what food you eat, what supermarket you go to, what people you hang out with, what road you choose to drive on, what time of day you're allowed a cup of tea, all of these things have a massive effect on your internal environment. And I can see people, because I'll talk about this in session 1, going, they're like twitching because they're like, I'm telling you, I've just come out of a relationship where I'm being tortured and you want to talk to me about my favorite supermarket, But the thing is, and people don't want to do it because they want the end game. And the end game is, how do you make yourself peaceful? How do you make yourself happy? That's the end game. And so your job in the very beginning of a therapeutic process is to look after yourself, to cotton wool yourself, to really be careful with absolutely everything that you're doing, saying, thinking, feeling, putting into your body, because it's all massively effective.
And what you're talking about is, yes, so people are trying to avoid it by some cognitive trickery. But you're saying the self needs to be strengthened so that you can actually reject the toxicity. Because otherwise, if we just make you say no and force you to do mirror work or, I don't know, some affirmations.
And then everybody goes back.
In 2 weeks' time, you'll be back with
Everybody
them.
goes back because they still don't know what they want, because they still don't know what they like, because they still don't know where they're comfortable.
Because the self is still weak.
And because they're uncomfortable all the time, which of course is very weakening.
What if people do coaching with you? What's your style? What can they expect from you?
It's a lot of action. Teach people a lot about what they can do in daily life, and everybody gets homework. So it's definitely not like we sit for an hour every week and chat. We do, but I also lead people through somatic reparenting meditations. And we do longer sessions when we do that. So there's plenty of room for talking, but what I did years of talk therapy, and what I found helped me is moving emotion through my body, moving experiences through my body, and actually changing my lifestyle to support who I want to be and who I think of myself as when I think of my little self on an angelic pedestal, as we all have the capacity to do and forget. But if I were that person, what would that person be thinking, feeling, doing with their day? And moving more towards that.
Excellent. You've given me a lot to think about.
Good, I like to do that.
Yeah, I'll probably steal it and just put it in a course. And just not credit you at all. People we saw the interview, your sister said this. No, she didn't. It's
who?
I'm an only child.
I'm an only child.
I'm an only child and a genius to boot.